Welcome to Revenge Report. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let's dive in. It had been 15 years since anyone in my family had reached out to me, so when the letter arrived, it almost felt like a joke. The delicate script on the front, the golden letters shimmering like something from a fairy tale. There was no mistaking it. It was an invitation to my cousin Rachel's wedding. The timing was ridiculous. Who the hell was getting married after all this time? And why now? Why send that invitation to me, the family black sheep? I stared at the envelope for what felt like forever, the weight of it too much to bear, but it didn't seem real. I could still see it, how everything went down at that family Christmas years ago when I was 26. My parents, proud and smug as always, had made the announcement like I was being buried. Cassandra's been kicked out of the military, they'd said, loud enough for everyone to hear. It wasn't true, not even close. I hadn't been kicked out, but I hadn't exactly corrected them. They'd never know the real reason for my disappearance, not while I was still in the middle of it all, recruited into a top-secret Army intelligence unit that no one was supposed to know about. But that night, with my whole family staring at me, I felt like the whole world was crumbling. And now, here was this damn invitation. After everything, it felt almost absurd. I pulled the card out, reading the words again, just to make sure it wasn't a mistake. The handwriting was as perfect as it was meaningless. After a few seconds, I scribbled attending in the corner, with the pen my government issued always on the ready pen, a small act of defiance. I didn't care what they thought anymore. I was going. I parked the rented car in the lot and took a long breath. Riverside Country Club. The place smelled like wealth and polished marble floors, the kind of place I used to look at from the outside, wishing I could be part of it. But today, I wasn't wishing for anything. I was here to face them. I stepped out of the car, smoothing my simple black dress. It was a far cry from the gowns I knew they'd be wearing, but it fit fine, and that was all that mattered. The same place my grandmother's funeral had been. Only I'd missed that too. My unit had called me out of the country for a mission that had mattered more than some over-the-top sentimental send-off. A mission that, at the time, felt more like the real world than any of this. As I walked toward the doors, the sound of laughter and chatter grew louder, the air colder. I knew I was walking into a scene I couldn't escape, but I kept my head high. Let them talk. Let them stare. The moment I stepped inside, I saw them. My family, the golden cousins, the hovering, judgmental parents, the smug aunts. They were clustered by the bar, dressed to impress, pretending like they weren't noticing me. But I could feel their eyes. They always had a way of making you feel them. Then my mother's voice cut through everything. "Cassandra," she said, loud enough to stop conversation in its tracks. "What are you doing here?" It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. My heart picked up, but I didn't flinch. I just pulled the invitation from my bag, held it up. The gold lettering shone under the lights like a slap in the face. "I'm here for the wedding," I said, calm, too calm. She squinted at the invitation, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. My mother turned, her eyes darting from me to the people around us as if she were hoping they would validate her embarrassment. Aunt Jennifer, who I swear had been waiting to see me fail, looked me up and down. Her eyes were sharp, her smile cruel. "Oh, look at that," she said to no one in particular, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Cassandra Bowen, the military hero." She said the words with heavy sarcasm, letting them hang in the air. "How did you end up in that Walmart dress? Was it on sale?" There were chuckles from my cousins, including Michael, who was standing behind her, arms crossed, as always. He shot me a look like I was some kind of embarrassment. I didn't answer her. I didn't need to. I already knew what they thought, what they all thought. None of them knew anything about me anymore. Hell, they never did. They thought they could label me, judge me based on a few wild rumors and half-truths. But I didn't have to explain myself to them, not anymore. Aunt Jennifer wasn't done. She sniffed, tilting her head. "What's the deal, Cass? I thought you'd be, at least important by now. What are you, some kind of rent-a-cop?" My jaw tightened. I wanted to throw something at her. Or maybe just walk out and say to hell with it. But I didn't. I stayed still, silent. Michael joined in, tapping away on his phone, no doubt digging through the pathetic, scrubbed version of my online bio. "Looks like Cassandra's got herself a real job now. Real corporate big shot." He read aloud, his voice dripping with mockery. Works for a private security firm in a management role. He looked up at me, eyes wide with fake surprise. Wow, Cass, you made it so far. Congrats. I felt the blood rise to my face, but I didn't show it. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me react. Instead, I just stood there, keeping my posture straight, keeping my mouth shut. Well, I said, finally breaking the silence, you'd be surprised what I can accomplish when I'm not busy being judged by you. It landed like a stone dropped in water. The room quieted for a second, but then my mom was back, pushing in with her usual venom. You never told us what really happened, Cassandra. You don't think we deserve to know. All these years, we thought you were some failure. I didn't answer. I couldn't. What was I supposed to say? That they had no idea how deep the lies went, that everything had to be a cover for my own safety. It wasn't their fault they didn't know, but it wasn't my responsibility to explain it now. They didn't deserve it. Not anymore. Aunt Jennifer smirked, shooting a look at her friends across the room. She's still the same, she muttered, loud enough for me to hear. Always the disappointment. That one stung, but I kept my face flat, my fists clenched at my sides. I wasn't here for them. I was here for Rachel, and whatever this day had to offer, it would not break me. Not now. The silence hung in the air for a beat too long, like they were all waiting for me to break. But I didn't. I stood there clutching the invitation, the only thing keeping me tethered to this circus of a family. My mother, as expected, was the first to push further. You really think we're all buying this, Cassandra? She asked, leaning in close, her voice too loud for my comfort. You're broke, aren't you? I heard you had to take a side job just to make ends meet. What happened to all that promise you had? I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Let her believe whatever she wanted, but the sting of it hit me anyway, a sharp pain in my chest. I had worked harder than they would ever know to make sure I had anything. She couldn't understand that. Aunt Jennifer, overhearing the jab, leaned forward with that smug expression of hers and added, I heard you're working some security job now. Rent-a-cop, huh? That sounds about right for you. A few of my cousins laughed, and I felt every one of their eyes on me like a weight I couldn't shake off. It wasn't the first time I'd been called a rent-a-cop. It wouldn't be the last, either. But what really got me was when Michael, always the one with the smartest mouth, decided to take his turn. He pulled out his phone, probably to dig through some outdated info on the Cassandra Bowen search results. I knew exactly what was coming. Check this out, he said, tapping at the screen. The bio on her security company sounds real impressive. He read the bland corporate speak aloud, his voice dripping with mock admiration. Cassandra Bowen serves as the senior operations manager for a privately owned security firm that specializes in high-profile events and risk mitigation. He paused, letting the words settle in the air like a punchline. Experienced in coordinating teams across the globe, providing top-tier protection for a variety of clients. He laughed, the sound so fake it made my skin crawl. A variety of clients? What does that even mean, Cass? Who are these clients? The mall cops. The rest of them snickered like they were in on some private joke at my expense. Every word they threw at me hit harder than the last, but I didn't flinch. I couldn't afford to. You really think you fooled everyone? My mother said again, her voice hard, almost venomous. You think you're important now? That your little job matters? She didn't know what mattered, and that pissed me off more than I'd ever let on. I had fought for my life out there, on foreign soil where I couldn't even tell her where I was, what I was doing, or why. They never knew the truth of it. She didn't get it. She never had. You know, she continued, I heard stories, Cass, from your friends, your superiors. Her eyes bored into me like daggers. You were always the wild one. They kicked you out for insubordination, didn't they? Heard you had a problem with drinking too. All those rumors, dishonorably discharged, wasn't it? Her words sliced through the air, each one worse than the last. I couldn't believe what she was saying. It was all lies. But I stayed quiet. The truth didn't matter here, not anymore. Not to them. I saw Michael out of the corner of my eye scrolling through the fake company bio again. He stopped and looked up at me, his face contorting with that sick, self-satisfied grin. Oh, and look at this. One of her specialties, he said, as though unveiling some grand mystery. Managing logistics for high-risk operations. He dragged out the words, stretching them for maximum effect. So, what? You just stand around making sure no one steals the champagne. The laughter was louder this time, and I felt every inch of it. Like I was invisible, like I didn't even deserve to be standing in that room with them. But I held my ground, standing taller, even as I wanted to disappear into the floor. Yeah, that's right, I finally said, my voice sharp and steady. I'm the one who makes sure people like you get through events like this without something going sideways. But you wouldn't understand, would you? You're too busy mocking me to see the real work. That was all I could give them. A moment of truth in a sea of lies. But I wasn't here to defend myself. I wasn't here to beg for respect. I wasn't that person anymore. They all stared at me for a second too long, their smugness fading, but no one said anything else. They didn't need to. They'd already decided who I was. The fallen soldier, the disappointment, the girl who'd been forgotten the second they thought she didn't matter. And I let them. I let them think whatever they wanted. Because I didn't need their approval. I was done fighting for it. I slipped into a seat in the back of the ceremony hall, as far from the front as I could get without actually leaving. The seats were plush, the kind of rich velvet that looked like it belonged in a movie set. The whole place smelled like fresh flowers and something else I couldn't quite place. Something cold and sterile, like it was trying too hard to be perfect. Rachel was up there, standing next to the guy she was marrying, but she didn't look happy. She looked nervous. Her hands fidgeted at her sides, the same way mine did whenever I was out of my element. Every time she glanced around, I saw her eyes skip over me, not meeting mine for even a second. I didn't blame her. It wasn't like we'd ever been close. The ceremony was beautiful. Too beautiful, in fact. Polished, choreographed, like a fairy tale, all the right words said at all the right moments. The couple exchanged vows in front of a marble altar with crystal chandeliers overhead, as though they were sealing some sort of divine pact, and I couldn't help but feel the weight of it. I wasn't supposed to be here. I wasn't supposed to have this seat, this view, this history with them. As the ceremony wrapped up, I found my way to the reception hall, hoping for some space, some distance from the people who couldn't even hide their disgust. I ended up at one of the back tables, surrounded by strangers, people I didn't know and didn't want to know. None of them mattered, not really. But I was a ghost to them, so I fit in just fine. The chatter around me was the same as it had been earlier. Light, shallow, full of names and brands and who was doing what with who. My presence barely registered, except for the occasional sideways glance. But then I caught snippets of the whispers that followed me, barely veiled, like they were trying to be quiet but knew I could hear them. Did you know she was kicked out of the military? Heard she got dishonorably discharged. It's a shame, really. She was always so wild. Another voice added, softer but still sharp. I heard she had a drinking problem. No surprise she ended up here, away from everyone. They didn't even know me. They didn't know the truth, but they didn't care to either. All they saw was what they wanted to see, a failure, a nobody. I sank deeper into my chair, the fabric of my dress suddenly feeling too tight, the buzz of the room too loud. The air felt thick, the way it does right before a storm hits. But I wasn't here to fight back. I wasn't here to prove anything to anyone, not anymore. The room kept spinning around me. People chatting, glasses clinking, the hum of polite conversation about new jobs, babies, houses, the privileged hum of a world I had never been a part of, yet had somehow found my way into, even if only for tonight. It felt like I could disappear if I wanted to, slip out of the room, out of the life they thought they knew, and no one would even notice. But I didn't leave. I stayed, watching the whole thing unfold like it was happening to someone else. And then it happened. The moment that changed everything. A voice sharp and commanding cut through the noise. Colonel Bowen, the voice asked, and for a second I thought I had imagined it. But no. The room stilled as a man in uniform, wearing dress blues, walked through the crowd with purpose. I straightened up instinctively. The room was quiet now, all eyes turning to him, then to me. He stopped at my table, standing tall, his posture perfect. He was silver-haired, his face lined with the kind of command you only got from years of service. He looked right at me. Colonel Bowen, he said again, and the silence grew thick. I stood up, every eye in the room following my movement. I didn't say anything, but there was no mistaking it. The weight of those two words in front of all these people, especially my family, was a blow, a revelation. And I didn't need to explain it. Not here, not now. The officer offered his hand, and I shook it firmly, my military instinct taking over. General Morrison, he said, nodding slightly as he addressed the crowd. The room seemed to hold its breath. He continued, his voice steady, formal, but loud enough for everyone to hear. This is Colonel Cassandra Bowen. We served together in Afghanistan. In fact, she led some of the most classified operations in the region. Her actions saved thousands of lives. The room shifted, people leaning in, murmurs rising like a wave. For the first time since I'd walked in, I wasn't invisible. Every eye in the room was on me, but not with mockery anymore. They were staring at me, the real me, and I knew what they were thinking. It wasn't disappointment anymore. It was shock. It was disbelief. I stood tall, keeping my face neutral, not giving them anything more than what they'd already been handed. The general gave me a respectful nod, then turned and walked away, leaving me in that stunned silence, surrounded by the kind of people who had never truly known me. The room still hadn't fully settled when the door opened again. A group of men in dress blues walked in, cutting through the crowd like they were on a mission. The air shifted with their presence, the buzzing conversation coming to an abrupt halt. Eyes turned toward them in a way that made it clear they weren't just some guests. They were something else, something that commanded attention. I could feel the room shifting. Curiosity, whispers, the tension of people trying to figure out why there were military men at a private wedding. The weight of it pressed on me, but I kept my face neutral. It was hard not to notice how their sharp uniforms contrasted with the glittering dresses and suits around us. The lead officer, the one at the front, cut through the crowd like he had a purpose. His silver hair gleamed under the lights, and his eyes were focused, straight ahead. He walked right up to my table where I was still standing, frozen, really, trying to gauge what was happening. People were still staring, and I was certain this wasn't how they'd expected the night to go. "Colonel Bowen," the officer said, his voice carrying across the room, direct and formal, like it was the most natural thing in the world. My chest tightened as every single person's gaze snapped toward me. My heart drummed in my ears, but I didn't falter. I stood up slowly, the weight of the moment settling on my shoulders. The sudden attention felt suffocating, like 1,000 eyes piercing through me, but I forced my body to move with the precision I'd learned over the years. I met the officer's eyes, his gaze steady, but there was something in it, something like respect that felt strange in this context. He extended his hand, and I shook it. "General Morrison," he said, nodding with quiet authority. It was a name I knew well, but hearing it here, in this room, in front of these people, well, it hit differently. The room was silent now, completely still. I could feel every set of eyes on me, and it was like they could finally see me, not the version they'd built up in their minds. But there was no time to take it all in, not yet. General Morrison didn't let the moment hang there for too long. "Colonel Bowen led some of the most classified operations in Afghanistan," he continued, his voice clear and precise, as though the room needed to hear it, needed to understand what was happening. Her work saved lives, thousands of lives. He paused, looking around the room, letting his words land like a heavy bomb. "It's an honor to be here with her." A murmur rippled through the crowd, and I felt the weight of it all. They didn't know me. Not really. The ones who had whispered behind my back, who thought they knew my story, they didn't have a damn clue, but here I was. And I wasn't hiding anymore. The officer turned slightly, his eyes scanning the room, and his gaze landed on someone I hadn't expected to see. At first, I didn't even recognize him, but as his eyes met mine, the recognition hit like a punch in the gut. It was the bride's new father-in-law, standing across the room, looking just as stunned as everyone else. General Morrison's voice cut through the quiet again. "Colonel Bowen was an integral part of the mission that saved your son's life in Afghanistan. He served under her command." The father-in-law's face flushed. Shock, confusion, disbelief. But there was something else too, something like awe. But it was buried underneath all that surprise. He wasn't the only one looking at me like that. The rest of the room was still frozen, mouths slightly open, as if they couldn't quite process the truth that had just been dropped into their lap. I stood tall, not saying a word. It was too late to explain anything, too late for any of them to understand. But there was something in the air now, a shift, a recognition, and it was mine. But I wasn't done. Not yet. General Morrison's words had carried weight, but there was still more to this night. More to me, and I wasn't about to let them miss it. Rachel, standing at the front, caught my eye then. She wasn't smiling anymore. In fact, she looked downright nervous. She couldn't hide the way her eyes flickered from me to the crowd, like she was waiting for the ground to swallow her up. I saw the tightness in her shoulders, the way she shifted uncomfortably, but that wasn't my problem. Not anymore. The air in the room still felt thick, and I could hear the subtle buzz of conversation starting again, but this time, the tone was different. People weren't whispering in judgment. They were trying to piece together what had just been said, what it meant about me, about who I really was. And for the first time tonight, I wasn't the invisible disappointment in the back. I wasn't the one who had failed. I was someone else now, someone with a history they couldn't ignore, someone who had earned this respect, even if none of them had ever seen it coming. And that was enough. For now. The room stayed frozen, and General Morrison didn't let the silence linger for too long. His voice, calm but commanding, cut through the tension like a knife. "Colonel Bowen," he continued, his eyes scanning the crowd, making sure everyone was listening, really listening. "In her time serving, she's been awarded 2 Bronze Stars and 3 Purple Hearts for her bravery under fire. And that's not all." He paused, letting the weight of the words sink in, and I could feel every set of eyes on me again. "She received the Distinguished Service Cross for leading classified missions across 7 countries, missions that prevented thousands of deaths." The room inhaled sharply at that last part. The weight of it was too much for them, too much for anyone who hadn't known. I could see it on their faces, confusion, disbelief, some faces turning pale as they tried to process the enormity of what was being said. My family, standing on the outskirts, was watching in shock, and I couldn't help but glance over at my father. His face was hard to read, but his eyes, those eyes were a mix of something I couldn't name: resentment, shame. It wasn't good. Whatever it was. General Morrison didn't stop there. His next words were like a punch to the gut, one I wasn't entirely prepared for. "And now, it is my honor to present Colonel Bowen with her new orders." He reached into his uniform and pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table to me. I stared down at it for a second, the weight of it making my fingers feel heavy. "By the authority of the United States Army," he continued, his gaze never leaving mine, "Colonel Cassandra Bowen is hereby promoted to the rank of Brigadier General." For a split second, the room was completely still. I could hear the faintest of gasps, the subtle shifts of people trying to make sense of what they were hearing. Even General Morrison, standing there like a rock, gave me a moment to absorb it. Brigadier General. The title didn't sound real. It felt like someone else's. But I wasn't about to let that show. I had earned it, earned every damn step of it, and the people in that room needed to see it. I took the folder from the table, my hand steady as I slid it under my arm. I could feel my family's eyes boring into me, the shock on their faces almost comical. My father's mouth was tight, his eyes flickering between me and the people around us, like he was trying to process a truth he hadn't known, a truth none of them had known. "Thank you, General," I said, my voice calm, measured. I didn't need to say more. They didn't need to know how hard it had been, how much I had sacrificed. They didn't deserve that part of the story. The truth was right here in this moment, standing in front of them, wearing the uniform I had earned. General Morrison nodded, his salute crisp and formal. "Congratulations, Brigadier General Bowen." He turned, and the other officers, there were 3 of them, followed his lead, saluting me with the same respect. They were all military men, their faces etched with the kind of life experience that only comes from years of service. They didn't need to say anything more. They didn't have to. I didn't flinch when they saluted me. I didn't need to. For the first time that night, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. The officers began to move, starting to cut through the crowd, heading toward the door, but I could feel the weight of the room behind me, every single person watching, taking in the reality of the situation, their opinions shifting, their judgment crumbling. But my eyes kept going back to my father. The disbelief on his face was hard to miss. I could see the way his jaw clenched, his hands twitching, as if he were trying to keep it together. He'd never made that rank. He'd never been able to, and that was something he would have to live with. I stayed silent, letting the officers leave in the same formal way they had come. The room remained dead quiet, the kind of silence you feel in the pit of your stomach when the ground shifts beneath you, when the rules you thought you knew no longer apply. It was an odd feeling, being seen, really seen. And I could feel every person in that room weighing me against the version of me they had built up in their heads. This failed soldier, this lost cause, this disappointment. But they weren't seeing me at all. They were seeing what they wanted to see. And now they had to live with the truth that had been standing right there, in plain sight, all along. The room was still buzzing, but it felt distant, like I wasn't really part of it anymore. I hadn't even taken a full step away from the officers when I saw Rachel coming toward me. She was moving slowly, her face pale, her eyes wide. She looked lost, like she wasn't sure what was happening, what I was doing here, what this meant for everything she thought she knew about me. Cassandra? Her voice was shaky, barely above a whisper. She stopped a few feet from me, like she wasn't sure if she should get any closer. Is this all real? The general, the rank, everything. I didn't say anything right away. I didn't need to. I just stared at her, watching as she tried to make sense of the truth she'd been blind to for so long. I didn't have the energy to explain it to her, and honestly, I wasn't sure I even cared if she got it. Yes, I said flatly. It's all real. Her eyes flickered with confusion, and for a second she looked like she might break down. I didn't blame her. She wasn't the one who'd been hidden in plain sight for years. She wasn't the one who had to watch people treat her like a failure every time she showed up. I never knew, she said, her voice barely a whisper now. I never. Cass, I didn't know any of this. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell anyone? Her words stung, but not in the way they used to. The pity, the confusion, it didn't hit me the way it had when we were kids, before I'd learned how to lock everything away behind walls. Now, it just felt empty. You weren't supposed to know, I said. My voice was steady but cold. My cover had to stay airtight. If anyone knew what I was really doing, it could have blown everything up. That's how it works, Rachel. No one gets to know the truth. Not when it's classified. Not when it's dangerous. She looked like she wanted to say something, but didn't. She opened her mouth, closed it again, and just nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. Before I could turn away, I felt my father's presence behind me. His voice cracked through the air like a fist. Cass, wait! I froze. He was standing there, shifting awkwardly, as though he didn't know how to act. The man who had spent years ignoring me, who had written me off with a shrug and a sigh, was suddenly apologizing. I couldn't believe it. We didn't know, he said, his voice quieter than usual, like he was trying to find the right words. We didn't know it was like that. We didn't know you were important. Important. That was what it came down to. It was like he was trying to apologize for all those years, for everything he'd said about me when I was gone. But it was hollow. Too little. Too late. I turned to face him, and for a moment, I saw the guilt in his eyes, the one he always tried to bury under that indifferent exterior. He'd spent my entire life looking at me like I was a screw-up, someone to be ignored or discarded. And now, he was standing here, offering apologies. You couldn't have known, I said, my voice cool and calm. You weren't supposed to know? I couldn't risk it. His face shifted, the lines deepening as if he was starting to understand the weight of what I was saying. But then my mother stepped in, looking at me with that same mix of pity and shame that always seemed to follow her words. Oh, Cass, Her voice cracked, and she stopped, her hands trembling as she fumbled for the right words. I didn't mean it. I didn't mean any of those things I said. She was floundering, trying to undo everything she'd said to me over the years, trying to take back all the venom she'd thrown at me when I had nothing left to defend myself with. But I saw it for what it was. It wasn't real. It wasn't genuine. It was just another attempt to save face. Don't, I said, cutting her off. Don't even try to take it back. You said what you meant. You showed who you really are when I had nothing, and that's what I'll remember. Her face crumpled, and I didn't feel the satisfaction I thought I might. I didn't feel anything. She was still my mother, but that didn't mean she deserved the kind of forgiveness she was asking for. Not for the years of lies, the silent treatment, the judgment when I was at my lowest. I let the silence hang between us for a moment before I spoke again, softer this time, but still cold. I don't need your approval. I never did. But you need to know, I didn't do any of this for you. I did it for me. I turned away then, feeling the weight of their stares on my back, and made my way to the back of the room. There were no more words left to say. The truth had been out there for years, buried under lies and assumptions. And now, they had to live with it. I hadn't even made it halfway across the room when I heard Michael's voice, the one that always felt like it could cut through anything. Hold on a second, he he said, stepping forward, his arms wide in that mocking, self-assured way of his. You really think this is all on us? You honestly expect us to just know all of this, Cass? I didn't turn around. I could hear him getting closer, the sound of his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. His words were sharp, but they were defensive, like he was trying to justify something that had no excuse. We only knew what we were told. Okay, you disappeared, and all we got was your story. The one Mom and Dad told us. You really think we're supposed to just figure this out? I could feel his eyes on me, and I didn't even have to look to know that the others were backing him up. They always did. He wasn't wrong, though. Not completely. They didn't know the truth, but that didn't mean they had any right to act like they were the ones who'd been wronged. I turned slowly, enough to see his face contorted in a mix of annoyance and guilt. The room was still buzzing, but I could hear my heartbeat louder than anything else. No, Michael, I said quietly, but my words were sharp enough to make him pause. You don't get to play the victim here. You didn't know because you never wanted to know. You only cared when I became someone. When I wasn't just a screw-up, when I wasn't someone you could ignore. That's when you cared. His face reddened, but I kept going. You didn't give a damn about me when I wasn't doing something important. When I was stuck at the bottom, when I was out there risking my life and keeping secrets for all of you, that's when you didn't care. But now that you know I'm someone, it's all about the wow, you've really made it. I took a deep breath, letting the weight of all of it sit in the air between us. Do you know what I sacrificed for people like you? Weddings, holidays. Hell, I missed my own grandmother's funeral because I was in the middle of an operation, keeping your asses safe while you all sat at the table, stuffing your faces and pretending everything was perfect. I was the one risking it all. And for what? So you could sit here and judge me and then turn around and act like you were ever on my side. Michael opened his mouth to respond, but I didn't give him the chance. He wasn't listening to me. He was just trying to make himself feel better, make himself the one in control. I spent years in danger, Michael. Years, I continued, my voice unwavering, and I came home injured, bruised, broken. Not to be told I was less than, not to be looked down on. I didn't get to come home for the easy things. I was fighting battles you'll never understand, and you still don't. So don't you dare try to act like you were the victim here. Don't even think about it. I took another step back, looking past him, watching as my father moved to stand next to Michael, his face pinched. It was like watching him shrink in on himself. I don't expect you to understand, I said, quieter now, but don't apologize to me. You're not sorry. You're sorry because you got caught in the middle of something real, something you were never supposed to know. My father stepped forward, his voice soft but pleading. Cass, I'm sorry. I know we screwed up. I know I wasn't there for you. I didn't get it, but please, you're still family. Can't you forgive us? We didn't know. I blinked, the word family echoing in my head like a bad joke. The room felt smaller all of a sudden, as though it were closing in around me. You want to know why I can't forgive you? I said, my voice cold but steady. Because when I had nothing, you couldn't even pretend to give a damn. You didn't care. I wasn't family to you then. You only cared when I was someone, when I became something you could be proud of. My father opened his mouth again, but I raised my hand to stop him. You didn't care when I had nothing. You didn't care when I was struggling. That's what makes your apology worthless. You didn't want me then. You only want me now. I looked back at Rachel, and for the first time since I'd walked in, I saw something different in her face. She was standing there, her mascara running down her cheeks, silent tears streaking her face. She wasn't meeting my eyes, but I could see the shame in her posture. She wasn't trying to justify it, not like Michael, not like my parents. She just looked like she was realizing everything I'd been telling myself for years was true. She had gone along with it all. She had let them treat me like nothing. She had stayed silent when they all whispered behind my back. I can't forgive any of you, I said, turning away from them, feeling my voice tremble slightly for the first time. I'm done. I'm done trying to be the person you want me to be. I'm done being your punching bag. I'll never be your someone. I'm me now, and that's who you'll have to deal with. Rachel didn't say anything. She just wiped her eyes and turned away, still silent, still crying. And in that moment, I knew I was done. Done with trying to prove myself to them. They could live with their mistakes, and I could live with mine. But I wasn't going to pretend anymore. I found Rachel standing by the door, her back to the room, her shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. She didn't see me approach, and part of me almost wished I could slip away without saying anything. But I couldn't. Not after everything. "Rachel," I said softly, my voice a little softer than I meant it to be. She turned slowly, and the look on her face, so raw, so vulnerable, made my throat tighten. She wiped her eyes quickly, trying to pull it together, but the effort was futile. "I'm so sorry, Cass," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know. I didn't know it was like this. I just, I didn't think." I could feel the weight of her words, but I didn't need her apology. I'd learned long ago not to expect it. "I know," I said, keeping my voice calm, steady. "But I'm not here to make you feel better. I'm not here for your apology. You've had your whole life to figure out who I am, and you never did. But I'm done being someone's idea of who I should be." Rachel nodded slowly, tears still staining her cheeks. "I've always been scared to stand up," she said quietly. "Scared of what they'd think, what they'd say. But it's different now. You didn't deserve any of it." I didn't say anything for a moment. There wasn't much to say. "I hope you find your way," I finally said, "even if it's not with them." Her eyes flickered with some kind of quiet realization, and she took a shaky breath. "Goodbye, Cass," she said, her voice barely audible. "Goodbye, Rachel," I replied, then turned away before the weight of it all could drag me back into that pit of regret I'd buried years ago. I walked out into the cool night air, my breath sharp against the crispness of the evening. The lights from the country club flickered behind me, fading as I put more distance between me and the place that had been both my prison and my battleground for so long. I didn't look back. My phone buzzed in my pocket, the glow lighting up the night. I pulled it out and saw a string of messages, one from my father, one from Michael, one from Rachel, and a few from numbers I didn't recognize. I didn't even read them. I didn't need to. Instead, I hit the button to call my driver, Sergeant Martinez. The phone rang only once before he answered, his voice steady and professional as always. "Sergeant Martinez," he greeted me. "Where can I pick you up?" I stood outside the country club, the cold biting through my thin jacket, and I gave him the address of the hotel. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said, keeping it short. "Understood, ma'am. I'll be there." I hung up and stared at the quiet parking lot. For the first time in a long time, I felt calm. The weight of it all, the years of trying to be something I wasn't, the endless fight to prove myself to people who didn't matter anymore, it was gone. The truth had come out, and now they had to live with it. I didn't owe them anything. I never had. Back at my hotel, I stripped off the dress I'd worn for that mockery of a wedding. The fabric felt like someone else's life, a costume that I'd slipped into for a night. I tossed it into the corner, pulling on the simple, practical clothes I knew would be more useful for the days ahead. I sat down at the small desk, my hands moving automatically as I pulled up the new mission details on my laptop. There was no time to waste. There never was. For the first time in years, I felt peace. Not the kind they gave you in a room full of fake smiles and empty apologies, but the kind that came from knowing you could walk away and never look back. The truth was out there, and I was done with them. I was me again.